are. Finally. Okay, well there's no need to come in like a herd of elephants. There are people working around us. I know the floor is wooden. It's really important that we take time to walk quietly so we don't disturb the people around us. Now that you're here, let me introduce myself. I am leading Ren Wilson and I will be looking after you today and making sure that by the time that you leave this afternoon, you know everything there is to know about codes and ciphers that you will need to know for the position that you are hopefully filling if you manage to pass your induction with us. So it's really important that we send lots of messages and we do so in a safe and secure way here at Western Approaches. So there are lots of strategic locations that we are in constant communication with. We are in touch with the war rooms down in London where you will find the Prime Minister. There are locations around the country, secure Navy bases and RAF bases. Also, we're in constant contact with Station X, which is the top secret location where they are working very hard on groundbreaking technology to help us win the war. Also, there are convoys and air patrols that you will find in the Atlantic Oceans, as well as the Navy escorts for those convoys to protect our shipping that is coming across the ocean to us. I know that you know how important that is. And it's important that all these places have weather reports and updates that will travel between stations and locations around the country. So all those messages come into and out of Western Approaches 24/7 on a continuous basis. So it's really important that anything that you learn while you are here is not transmitted any further. So that is why you will have all read, understood, and then signed the Official Secrets Act, which makes it an offence for you to talk about any government information to anybody else. I know that might seem a bit strange. Yes, I understand that it might not be important not to talk about what you had in the Navy for your dinner yesterday, but it is not up to us to talk about what is classified war information. We don't know what information that the enemy is looking for, and it's potentially some of those clues might give them information that they were looking for. We don't know about that. And remember, spies do not come in just black coats and trilby hats. So now that you're here, let's make sure that you know the difference between a code and a cipher. That's very important. So a code, first of all. Anybody know what a code might mean? Anybody? Ah, yes? Very good. So a code, in case you didn't catch that, a code is when they change the meaning of a message by changing the words into another word or possibly using some symbols. For example, when we talk about the cabinet war rooms, we wouldn't call them that in case anybody else would hear about it. We refer to it as the paddock. And that operation where we evacuated all our soldiers off the beaches from Dunkirk, that was called Operation Dynamo. So everything has an important code name, and that's what we have to use so that the enemy wouldn't have a clue what it was we were talking about should they intercept those messages. Right, so we know what a code is. How about a cipher? Anybody? Yes, absolutely. So if you didn't catch that, a cipher is a way that we can hide a message within the message by jumbling up the letters. So for example, we have a Caesar cipher, which is named after the Julius Caesar, and it goes back right down to how we can encrypt a message. So for example, I have the word Churchill, and we want to use our Caesar cipher. So the C will shift up one place, and it will become a D. H will go to I, U becomes V, or S, C is another D, H is another I now becomes J, and L, M. So now we have hidden the word Churchill by using a Caesar cipher and shifting it up just one. I have to say, I'm very impressed. Have you been to the Government Code and Cipher School? No? Down at Station X? Well, they're doing groundbreaking technology and work to try and break the German codes, which we call Ultra. So if you'd like to work, maybe this will be something that you have skills at, and our work later on will prove whether you are up to it or not. So initially in Station X, they were looking for people who had skills in administration and office work. But they found that actually there are more useful skills, and maybe this is where you will excel. So maybe you are really good at languages, or maybe you're very good at mathematics. They are the skills they're looking for down in Station X at the moment. Now, linguists are incredibly important because the messages that we would listen and hear are not necessarily written in English at all. They would be written in other languages, particularly German and Italian, but any European language and maybe even Japanese, because the Japanese are fighting in the war, so we need to be able to understand what they're saying if we interpret or intercept any of their messages. But if you find that you have mathematical skills, maybe that's where you might find you could be a computer. No, I'm not making a joke. You could be a computer. A computer is somebody who does really complicated mathematical calculations in order to solve a problem. That's exactly what they're doing down in Station X. So you could be a computer, maybe you could be a translator, but those are all key skills now. And if you find that you have strengths in this area, you could possibly put in for a transfer down to Station X, and maybe that's where you could do some groundbreaking work and be part of what's happening down there. Doesn't appeal to you? Don't worry, there's also some counter-espionage happening down there. So that is when we try and infiltrate the German messages and post false information, false messages to make them think or act in a way that suits us, but it isn't, I suppose, real news or anything that's accurate at all. So now that we know what messages we can send, we need to think about how we're actually going to do that. One of the oldest ways of sending messages is by semaphore, and that was developed by the Frenchman Claude Chappe back in 1792. And he discovered that the human eye is really good at discerning angles. So he's used that to put together a series of shapes, two-arm shapes, which will send messages. And it was Admiral Popham who saw the potential for that in the Royal Navy in the early 1800s. And he then developed the use of alphabet flags, which is what our current semaphore is based on. So I think it's really important that we all have a go at actually practicing some semaphores. So we all need to stand up. Very important. Nice and straight, please. So every time we go to send a message or in between words, we always use the ready signal. You must imagine we have flags, and your flags are at the ready. So our first few letters only use one arm. So we start with A. No, it's the other arm. It's your right arm you've got to start with. So we'll start again. So A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Now it's a similar pattern for the next series, but we use both arms. So then it's H, I, J is different. J comes all the way over here. That's like a nice right angle. So J, and then we go back to K, L, M, N. Now our arm moves up, and then we get O, P, Q, or S, T, U, V is different, V is down here, W, X, Y, and Z. And remember, when you finish, back here to show that you finished your message. So it's really important, particularly boys, if you want to be in the Navy, when they're trying to send messages between ships and they want to have radio silence, that is one way that they do that still a lot in the Navy. So it's really important that you're up to speed, being able to actually flag the messages and also receive and understand what they are. So another way of sending messages would be Morse code. And that was developed a little bit later in the 1830s by Samuel Morse, and that was part of the telegraph system that was being developed at that time. So it was a really good way of sending messages over a longer distance. The problem with semaphore, you've got to be able to see the person who's sending the message to you. Whereas Morse code, you could travel over long distances, particularly with the advent of radio waves, and you can do it at night time in the dark. So it's versatile and it can be used 24/7. And most of the messages coming into and out of Western approaches here will be sent using Morse code. So the operators have a transmitter very like this one, and this is where you actually will send the messages. As you can see, I've just got a sheet here to show you, but it's telling you that each letter has been assigned a different combination of circles and dashes. These are dits and das, long signals and short signals, and they're married up, and each letter has its own individual code. So it's really important when you're learning Morse that you know you've got to get the dits all the same length and the das all the same length. And when you're sending the messages with this, you hold it down and it creates the circuit. And obviously in the radio room, they're connected to the radio itself. So we have, for example, E, which is one short little dot. E is the most common letter that we use in our English alphabet. It's got the simplest code. So it's just literally one tap. And T is one long da. So again, just one, but we hold it longer. 3 times longer to be exact. And then each other letter has its own combinations. So S, whereas O would be 3 long das. When you're learning Morse code, it might seem very strange at the beginning, but it's really important that you practice. So you will hear the sounds, you will see the letters, and you will get to practice sending the messages using the radio transmitter. And very quickly, you'll pick it up just like another language. And as I said, all the messages that come in out of the Royal Navy Central Wireless Room are sent via Morse code. We might get a chance to have a quick peek in there later on. So all the messages that come into and out of Western approaches in the Navy room will come via Morse code. But it would be very easy for those to be intercepted if they were not coded further. Anybody listening would be able to just work them out. So there is a top secret machine that we use, and I cannot tell you very much about it. It's called the Type X machine, and it is the way that the British encode their messages. Now, it was developed just before the war by Wing Commander Lywood for the RAF, but obviously when the other, the Navy and the Army saw the potential, they also decided to use that particular system. So there are not enough for all the locations that would like them, but very lucky we have one here at Western Approaches. So there is one machine I can tell you a little bit more about it, and it is the Enigma machine. I'm sure if you know anything about the German Ultra system, you will know about that. It is, here's a picture that we have of the Enigma machine. And it is a machine developed just after the First World War by a gentleman called Arthur Scherbius, and it was actually for the banking industry. And it was a way of encrypting messages. But it was small, it's battery operated, so the Army quickly saw the potential and decided they were going to take and amend it for their use. The only problem with that potentially is that it transmits information, it doesn't receive anything, because if it needed to receive, it would have more equipment and a bigger battery, so it needs to be portable so that the Germans can bring it to wherever they need to be sending encrypted messages from. Now, as you can see, there is a keypad here at the front. So you type your message into the Enigma machine. As you do so, there are letters behind that light up, the letter pad. And so each time you press a letter, you might press P, and you would expect P would light up. But because of the coding machine, another letter will light up instead. You might just be able to make out here, there are wheels, rotors within the machine. They are interchangeable. And that is the mechanism that makes it such a difficult thing to encrypt. Messages are jumbled up, and then even further using these plug boards at the front, the wiring that could be connected in different ways. So there are millions of different ways of scrambling a message that is being sent by the Enigma machine. Now, we are incredibly lucky here in Britain because there had been the Polish Cipher Bureau who was working hard to break one of these machines in the 1930s. And under the leadership of Marian Rejewski, there were people who met just before war broke out in September 1939. They met with people who would become the key leaders down at Station X. No, we call it Station X. We can't call it Bletchley Park. It's a code name. We did talk about code names. So at Station X, there are people like Dilly Knox, Tony Kendrick, Alan Turing and Gordon Welshman, and they are the foundation of the team behind trying to actually break this machine and work out what it is the Germans are sending. Even more important, there's another message which we are starting to understand more about, and it is Professor Max Neumann who is working on that again down at Station X, and we believe those are the messages being sent between Hitler himself and the German High Command. So if we could find a way of deciphering those, that would make really big inroads into the top level of messages that are being sent within the Nazi Party. But it remains a secret so far. I believe there is a general post office engineer who's been tasked with developing a machine for that. But again, I don't know any more than that because it is so top secret. We are not told about all these things here at Western Approaches, only what we need to know. So I suppose it does beg the dilemma. What would happen if we do break the ultra messages? Imagine we were able to crack Enigma. Because if we can read the German messages and understand what their actions are going to be, that puts us in a really good position to be able to change our plans or to do things tactically differently. And we would be able to save lives, save shipping, and hopefully shorten the war. But the problem with that is if we do too much, if we change too many things, if we make things better for us and worse for the Germans, and they cop onto us doing that, then I suppose they would guess that we've actually worked out how their Enigma machine is coded, and then they go and make it more complicated again, and then we're back to square one. So I'm glad I am not having to have those kind of decisions to make. So it's really important before you leave that you understand the 6 stages of breaking codes. So you probably know a lot of these, we've talked around a lot of these, but the first stage is to actually intercept your message. So most messages are sent via the radio. So there have been stations set up all around the country, and actually even within the Atlantic and on islands, places that are of strategic importance to gather those radio messages. And they are called Y stations, Y standing for wireless interception. And some of those listen to specific types of messages. Some of them will listen to messages from specific locations. Some of them will listen to specific types of messages. Or some of them also now are Huff-Duff stations. So Huff-Duff, high frequency directional finding stations. They will then be able to pinpoint where the message is being sent from, and that's particularly important somewhere like the Atlantic Ocean. It gives us a clue where the German submarines might be operating and allows our Navy escorts to intercept them and hopefully sink them as well. So when we've got the message, then we have to work out how it's been encrypted. And this is possibly the most difficult part because there's nobody telling the people working on this how to do it. They can't ask anybody, oh, by the way, how did you do this? So they have to rely on themselves. They might have a key. They might be lucky enough to have what's called a crib. That's if they have previously deciphered a section of message, they think it's correct and it reappears somewhere else, then maybe that allows them to find a way in. And that's what they're looking for, a way into the code. So maybe they're looking at the frequency, which are the letters that are the most frequently used, knowing how many letters are used within the language. They might be looking at certain digraphs or combinations of letters, repeating patterns, anything that they can find to give them that way in to actually understanding how that message has been coded. So when they've done that, then they need to decipher it. So it's really important that you work carefully here, thinking that you might be working in a foreign language. You mightn't understand what you're doing, so it's really important that you don't have any transcription errors, because one letter different might change the whole meaning of the message. It's really important that does not happen. So it's really important to work really carefully, very methodically, take your time and do it accurately. Then the next stage is to translate it into English, and that's when our language specialists come into their own. So they would be able to listen, read the message and then translate it so it can be acted upon. So the next stage is then trying to not just rush in and act upon it quickly, we want to try and cross-reference that information. So there's often a lot of wireless chatter, conversation, communications going backwards and forwards that often can be linked to a particular event or an operation that's being planned or undertaken. That just allows us to build up a bigger picture of what's going on and also to verify it's accurate, because don't forget, we're trying to give false information to the Nazis. They're doing the same to us. It's really important that we don't fall into that trap. Now, if you're looking at that bigger picture, you mightn't be the person who is actually doing that, because it was often the people further up who are getting information from lots of different places and pulling it all together to make the strategic decisions. So the last stage of anything is to make sure that any important information that you get, no matter how small you think it is, is always sent up to be acted upon by the people who can get the bigger picture and really understand what's happening. So there are the 6 stages of code breaking, and I'm certain that you know now what the difference is between a code and a cipher, and you have a little bit more understanding of how messages are sent and received. Right, so now you have some work to do. So there are some tasks that I have set for you to complete. But before you go, you might like a little quick look just into the Royal Navy radio room so you can see where the actual messages are received and sent using Morse code that we talked about a few moments ago. So I head this way. So this is the Royal Navy radio room, and as you can see, the Royal Navy radio is busy receiving messages. The messages that come into this room come from mainly the North Atlantic. So the Navy ships who are protecting the convoys, so the information is being sent to us here at Western Approaches, and then we are also able to then send radio messages using Morse code back to them, so either updating them with new information or new commands for them to do based on intelligence that we have received here at Western Approaches. As we walk out, have a look at the door, because the back of it has got copper, because this is a Faraday cage. It's specifically designed not to allow any interference with the radio messages. So that is our radio room, where the radio signals come into and out of. But what about the landline communications? Well, this is our main exchange here at Western Approaches, and you can see all the landline communications come in, and they are directed to the correct place. So often they come into the telecommunications room and they need to go to the teleprinter, which will automatically generate a printout of the messages, cutting edge technology. So our operator here will connect to the teleprinter machine, but we won't go into that room. It is way too noisy. So further down our corridor, behind me is a top secret station where any cipher messages come in. So that is directly from Station X. There's an armed guard on the front, so we do not go there. We do not talk about that. We don't know anything about that because it is so top secret, but that is further down this corridor. So we're going to head back this way to the entrance, and I think you have enough to be getting on with. You have the work that I've set you. I think it's time you got on with it.